Benjamin Elijah Mays once said, "I believe everyone was born into the world through something unique and distinct." Our host has been fortunate enough to have opportunities which allowed him to discover and fulfill his unique purpose. Unfortunately, every young person has not had those same opportunities. Expanding how we understand education, building community, impacting and improving lives, promoting HBCUs, and encouraging lifelong learning. Dean Talk brings together a variety of scholars, community and business professionals, along with student leaders to discuss topics which are critical to the improvement of educational equity and equality in America. Welcome to Dean Talk. Now, your host, R. Wayne Woodson.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I am excited to be with you all. It has been a very busy week, a very busy month, but I am excited about all that I have had the opportunity to do. And this is the last show for Dean Talk for February. We are preparing for March. We have some amazing things that will be coming to you, so we don't want you to miss it. A couple of things I always have to remember to thank our sponsors, Java 365 Coffee. If you use this code, this is a Black company. If you use that code Woodson20, you will get a discount. And they also provide resources for our scholarship fund for students at HBCUs. We want to make sure we thank them and support that company. Then the last thing, my team would be upset if I forgot. Don't forget to follow me on all my social media. Everything is now the same, Dr. Woodson 2020, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. So you can catch me on all of those platforms. I'm very active on social media. So if you connect with me there, you're actually speaking to me. A lot of people have had that question, but it is me. So make sure you follow me there. I am excited about today's conversation. We have Brian Keith Harris II on today. I met him, I think about a month ago on Clubhouse. I'm excited. He is doing amazing things in education. He has a book. He's really a supporter and promoter of our history. So I'm so excited to chat with him today. If you have questions, make sure you put those questions in the chat box, and we will answer those, as the show goes. So at this time, I'm excited to bring my guest up. And when he comes on, I'm going to make sure that he introduces himself much better than I did. Hey, sir, how are you?
Hey, good evening, sir. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity.
No problem. I am so glad to have you on. So for my guests who are not familiar with you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Brian Keith Harris II, school leader at a kindergarten through fifth grade all-boys school in Washington, D.C. This is my 16th year in education. I served 7 years as an elementary school teacher and 9 years as a school leader. I am the founder of Sons of Freedom Dance Institute, an organization that nurtures character, increases social awareness, and builds spiritual formation for Black and brown boys through classical and contemporary forms of dance and movement. Also the founder of Cultivating Young Kings, which is an organization that works with teachers, school leaders, and school districts that engage directly with Black and brown boys in underserved communities, and the author of 2 books, Freedom's Design, 20 Days of Empowering Black Kings, and the new book, I Am My History.
Well, okay, and for those who don't know, I take notes all through my interviews so I can make sure I hit all of the important points. Cool. So once again, thank you for being here. I am going to delve right in.
Sure.
Elementary education.
Yes.
Not my lane. I tell people all the time, I went to spend a day with a friend of mine several years ago, and by the end of the day, I was like, I need a vacation for like 2 weeks. Yeah. The energy level was much further beyond what we do at the higher ed. So how did you get into that? Why do you stay in it? What do you feel your impact is to education?
Yeah, so I think my journey to becoming an educator started since I was a child, right? It started back then. When I was a child, there were 3 things that I wanted to do. I wanted to become a teacher. I wanted to become a preacher, and I wanted to become a dancer. And I remember vividly having this large green chalkboard that my parents bought me. And I set up all of the, Lord, I'm laughing. I set up all of the teddy bears in my room, and they were my students, right? And sometimes I would be teaching, and then when I was done teaching, I would put on this like sheet as a robe, and I would start preaching. And so I kind of went back and forth between those two things with those teddy bears forever. And then I started inviting my parents and my grandparents to be a part of my class or my congregation. And so, so I share that story because that's really where the beginning of my love and passion for teaching and preaching began. When I went to college, however, I really wanted to, in a real sense, be a news anchor. That was like my thing. Like I really wanted to be a news anchor. And so going to college kind of put away that education portion of my life and really wanted to be a news anchor. I was walking through the student center in my junior year of college, and I saw the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology come up. They were there. They had a table, and I was like, oh man, I had planned to go to law school after that. So whole nother different field. So I'm just kind of like all over the place. And so walking in the student center, and just kind of felt that call to go to seminary. And so left college, graduated from college in 2003, and then I went to the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology. And it was there in seminary that I decided that when I get out of seminary, I am going to go directly to teaching in the classroom. And so that's kind of the journey, right? I remember my very first teaching experience. I taught preschool in Richmond, Virginia. I know you're like, what? Preschool? Those 3-year-olds. And I said, I love the babies, but I don't want to teach that small. Like that's a little too young for me. And so then moved to 1st and 3rd grade. And that's kind of really where the foundation for me teaching began. And so I guess the reason why I stay in education is because I believe that it's important for us to begin the process of helping our children to fulfill their goals and their dreams at an early age. We oftentimes begin this conversation with children when they get to middle school or even in high school, not realizing that elementary school is really where children begin to form their identity. They begin to form what it is that they want to do. And so I wanted to have an opportunity to be there during those formative years. And so I think that's the thing that has kept me in education. And then I just love the joy that children have when they begin to learn something new. There's nothing like seeing the eyes light up and the face light up when they're learning new things. And you don't always get that from middle school students or high school students, but you can be sure to get that from elementary school students. And so I think those are the things that have kept me in the field of education, particularly elementary school education.
And I'm glad you said that because, those of us, like I'm a data nerd, I read reports and analyze data in my spare time. And all the data tells us that by middle school, our Black males have decided whether education is important. Absolutely. So I'm glad you brought up the point about starting early and that we do need people to do it. Now, that being said, if it's not your lane, people don't do it because we also don't want to discourage them from continuing. I know that's not my lane. I'll get them in high school and move them on through. But so I'm glad that we have people in trenches. And I, too, set up my classroom when I was younger. My mother brought me these little plastic, we would call them plastic chairs. But I didn't use my toys. I made all my friends come and sit in my class while I taught them.
Yes, that's it.
And I gave homework and everything. And I just think those stories are so funny because, I just knew that when I visited my mother, that's what she was doing. And I thought everyone was supposed to do it.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting. We have some similarities there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So when we think males, and dance, that is always an interesting conversation. When I was growing up, our football players and things had to take dance classes because it helps with the sports. Right. But it's so interesting to me now when I hear so many people just counter that dance is not for males and all that, when in reality, if you look at any dance troupe in the world, they have to have males.
Of course.
And a lot of them make more than I ever will. So how do you have that conversation with parents, with your community, that this is a relevant part of our existence?
Yeah, so I think the very first part is we got to back up just a little bit. I think one of the things that I'm grateful for is having parents and family who supported and affirmed my love and passion for dance at an early age. Even though my parents kind of exposed me to many different things. So I was exposed to sports, other areas of the arts. But when I really developed this love and passion for dance, my parents made sure that I was immersed in it. And I start there because one of the things that parents must understand is that we do not know what or how the things that we put our children in, how that can save their lives and the lives of other people. So it's so important for us to listen to our children, to see what it is that our children are gravitating toward, and to really immerse them in that thing. Because again, you don't know how that thing is going to transform their lives or save their lives or have the potential and the possibility of inspiring and saving the lives of other people. And so when I have conversations with parents, particularly the boys who have been a part of Sons of Freedom Dance Institute, or just talking about dance in general, I begin that conversation. And I usually begin with a question to parents, which is, what is it that you wanted to become when you were a child? What did you have aspirations of becoming? And not only that, but how did that make you feel, right? When you were able to express and share what it is that you wanted to become, what did that make you feel like? And try to help them to understand that that same feeling of joy and excitement that they had around the things that they wanted to become is the same joy and excitement that boys who love to dance have when that topic is shared with them, or the opportunity is shared with them. And so I think that's kind of where I begin the conversation. Sons of Freedom really began because I wanted boys to have an opportunity to not just learn dance technique from a male, because sometimes when you're the only boy in class and your instructor is a female, you begin to mimic and emulate the movements of that instructor. And so it's important for boys who are interested in developing their dance technique to have a heavy influence and emphasis of male instructors so that they know properly how to utilize that technique as a male. Greater than that, I wanted to make sure that boys also had a family, a brotherhood, other boys who love the thing that they love to do, as a way to encourage them and help them to continue moving forward in their love and passion for dance. If you're the only boy in class and you don't see anyone else who looks like you, you do not oftentimes have the motivation to continue. And so when you're in a space where you see multiple people who look like you, who have the same interests, that in a real sense encourages you to continue to move. And so Sons of Freedom was kind of started in that way. And we have over time evolved. We have evolved to a place where we understand that it's not just important to teach boys technique, but it's also important to use dance as an embodied expression for boys to have a platform to share their thoughts and feelings about the things that are happening to them and the things that are happening to Black and brown people all over the world and in the country. And so we began to use dance as a way and as a form to bring awareness to people about the things that Black and brown boys are facing, experiencing, and feeling. And that kind of became the trajectory, or that became the mantra for Sons of Freedom. That when you come to a Sons of Freedom show, you're always going to see this element of social justice. You're always going to see this element of story being told through the lenses and through the eyes of a Black and brown young man.
So how did you get the name Sons of Freedom? Where did that name come from?
Yeah, and so I think that this person might be watching tonight. And so I did not come up with Sons of Freedom on my own. Very dear friend of mine came up with the name, and this is quickly how it happened. I worked at a particular school, and I was teaching dance at this school. And every morning I would have, morning duties. I would stand at the door and greet the young people that were coming in. And there was this parent who had just as much energy and animation as I did. And so we instantly connected. So her son would go into the building. We would still be talking until the duty was over, And I started talking to her about what my interests were in starting this all boys dance company. And she said, well, do you have a name? And I said, no, and so each day she would begin to ask me different questions. She would say things like, when you have your dance company, like, what kind of dances do you guys want to do? Or she would say things like, what are the things that you really want to teach boys? And as she was, asking those questions and I was answering those questions, I did not know that she was helping me to make the connections. And so the very last conversation we had before the name came, she said to me, what do you want boys to do in your dance company? And I said, I want them to dance, but I want them to be free. And the very next day she came back and she said, the name of your dance company should be Sons of Freedom. And we've gone with that name, and Sons of Freedom has existed for 12 years. And so for 12 years, we have been able to watch hundreds of boys go through the dance program, some of whom are getting degrees in dance, some are in high school dancing, and some are just doing well and doing better because of their time and experience with Sons of Freedom.
So the other day I was on a panel, I think it was my show. It's been so busy this month. And I was asked by a single mother, and the question was to me, how do you recommend we engage young males in single mother homes?
Yeah.
I mean, I gave my answer, but I posed a question to you. What would be some suggestions that you would have to single mothers who are doing a great job but really are looking for that male impact in their sons' lives?
Absolutely. I think the first thing is that I would start with the other males in the family, right? I would think about it and kind of point myself or find people in my actual family that can serve as a father figure or that male figure for my son. And if that is not possible, because sometimes it's not, I would then go to the school. And I would think about and kind of have conversations with the school to see if there are male teachers or other males functioning in other spaces in education in the school, and see what they would be interested in helping to lead and to guide. And then if that was not possible, which that oftentimes is not as well, I would then reach out to some of the local organizations in my city or in my community that have mentoring programs. There are mentoring programs all over the country, small and large. And there are people who are interested in helping to make a difference in the lives of Black and brown boys or boys in general. And so I think that's kind of where I would begin the process, because it's important for mothers to understand that boys need to specifically see males, people that look like them, people who have a shared experience and a commonality, in a way where it will really help them to be guided through life or to direct them through life. And I think sometimes what ends up happening is that when mothers cannot find those male figures, they begin to ignore or to silence that part of their son's journey. Right. And they say, well, we can't find anybody. I'm just going to go on. And it's true. Mothers must continue to go on in raising their children, but they also must take the time and invest in finding, researching, trying to locate someone in their family, in their child's school, in their community, who is interested and who will be invested in pouring into their son. So that would be my answer and advice to single mothers.
And I had great male figures in my life, but when I got to Morehouse, I can really attest to what you're saying. Because to see all of these Black males with these terminal degrees and where other people were considering them specialists, and they were presenting at these conferences and these diverse audiences. I mean, it was really at that time where I was like, oh, well, this might all be worth it. I mean, I went to college because my mother went to college, my dad worked. It was just what we were supposed to do. I mean, I went to academic magnet school and people went to college. Yeah. But it was when I got on that campus that I began to realize, oh, this might be useful.
That's right.
And so I'm fully agree with you when you say that sometimes having those figures that are tangible and in place are critical. And that's why, people always wonder why I keep mentoring so many people. But I think that's part of my work. Now, we're at about 50 or 60 now, and, that's only one person. But I really believe that those of you who are called to those earlier ages really make what we do a little easier, because what is always discouraging to me is when I get them at the college level and they've been beaten down for so long, or they have been just told they can't for so long.
Yeah, or ignored.
I was on a college campus, I would spend the whole first year trying to debunk and reprogram them to understand that they are just as capable as anyone else.
That's right.
So I think the work you're doing is just critical, just across the spectrum.
Thank you. Thank you.
So what is Cultivating Young Kings? What is this?
Yeah, and so it's funny that we're kind of going in this kind of sequential order, because all of these things were created so that parents who or mothers who did not have father figures, or even mothers and fathers who wanted to include more father figures or male figures in their children's lives, had an opportunity to be a part of organizations like this. And so Cultivating Young Kings was, or is, an opportunity for teachers, for school leaders, for school districts, and for parents to learn some best practices and strategies to incorporate in the lives and educational journey of Black and brown boys. And so what I saw and what I have seen throughout my educational career is that many teachers, many school leaders, many school districts, many parents don't always know exactly how to engage our young men or their children. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to offer some of these tools, some of these skills, some of this empowerment and encouragement and inspiration on how it is that we can help our boys to have successful outcomes. And so Cultivating Young Kings started the first year with being a conference. And we welcomed so many, I think we had probably like 250 educators, the very first conference, come and, just get information from teachers, from school counselors, from social workers, from yoga instructors, just everyone that we could find who knows exactly how it is that we can engage boys, and not just engage boys, but give boys an opportunity to express joy, to share their genius, and then also to know that they're in spaces where they're loved and valued. And because of that, they can just let go and express. And so Cultivating Young Kings differs from Sons of Freedom in that Sons of Freedom specifically is engaging boys around the area of movement, right? Also mindfulness, so helping them to be aware. Whereas Cultivating Young Kings is an opportunity for us to connect the academic outcomes to the social emotional outcomes and the spiritual outcomes that we want to see in our boys.
There's so much work to be done.
Yes.
I have been, my area, I work a lot with HBCUs. Mm-hmm. And I've been so inspired lately that there are programs for our Black male students that are now linking with other institutions. Our culture has this tendency sometimes to be separatist.
Yeah.
So I got my little sphere over here. I have my little sphere over here. So let's just talk for a second. How do you build those partnerships, below college? So how are you building that? Because I know that you can't do this work alone.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think with Sons of Freedom, we were very intentional about reaching out to and bringing our boys in front of other male dancers, from high school male dancers to college male dancers to professional male dancers. And what that did was it not only opened up their eyes, but it also opened up their understanding of the opportunities that they have in the dance field, and then perhaps in any field dealing with the arts. Mm-hmm. And so we bridged that connection by, looking at some of those performing art high schools that, would love for those young men, to come and teach little boys, right? Like how to dance, the technique, because that's also helping them as well, right? To hone in on their craft. And as it relates to college, we did the very same thing. And so our boys had an opportunity to, go to Howard University and work with the dance department at Howard University. Some of the boys and young men at Howard University, we performed at Howard University at the Ira Aldridge Theater, which is one of the historical theaters at Howard University. I think maybe the first kid dance company to perform there. And that was in 2017. And then, as far as college and professional dancers is concerned, we made partnerships with other professional companies. And so because of my experience and my time as a dancer, I was able to leverage some of those opportunities. And so dance companies like Dallas Black, the men from Dallas Black, and our boys were able to open for Dallas Black whenever they would come to DC and do their week dance concerts and performances. And so it was those kinds of connections that really helped our boys to kind of see their possibilities in dance and movement. And we really, really were intentional about making those connections, because in making those connections, our boys are not only able to understand, okay, this is what I can become in dance, but they were able to see other Black males doing positive things and things that they wanted to do, right? And so it inspired them. And not only that, when we talk about mentorship and we talk about bridging connections, we oftentimes talk about it from how college students or high school students or men are changing or empowering young people. We don't oftentimes talk about the impact that young people have on high school, college, and adults, right? And so I say that to say that not only was it instrumental for us to make those connections with those young male and professional male dancers for our younger boys, but it was also important for the older young men and the adult young men to get that level of inspiration as well. You know, they walked away saying, now I feel even more invigorated to do this work because of these young men. So I think it's a two-way street, and that's kind of how we built those connections.
So how is this current COVID-19 situation impacting everything? Because these are hands-on programs that you're talking about. We're not talking about somewhere you just get on the computer and, talk to your mentor for, 30 minutes and then we'll get back to you next week. So how is this pandemic impacting your programs?
Mm-hmm. Well, prior to the pandemic, a few months before the pandemic, we began to restructure Sons of Freedom. Because, after, 13 years, you begin to think about, okay, how can we restructure? How can we, create some new kind of programming? And so we were already in that space of restructuring. And so what we talked about all last year, because we had no activity last year, what we talked about last year was just how we're going to incorporate, starting next month, actually, these online masterclasses for boys. And we're going to start with hip hop, which is something that oftentimes brings everybody together. It is not the only genre of dance. We do classical and contemporary forms. And I have to say that because sometimes people think, oh, it's all, all boys, they're going to tap dance or do hip hop. And I have to quickly explain to people, no, they learn ballet and modern dance and West African and jazz. And they learned that first, right? So hip hop is something that for me is kind of like, we're going to do this kind of at the end or as an elective, right? And so we're going to do some of those virtual pieces and kind of see how that is going to impact the community. As it relates to cultivating young kings, the virtual space has been good because we've been able to go to more schools and have more engagement with teachers and schools and school leaders about how, to incorporate best practices from a virtual context with boys. And so I've done a lot of workshops, particularly in the area of mindfulness and helping boys to be present in the moment and how powerful of a tool that is and how that helps boys to have positive academic outcomes. And so it hasn't been all bad. I do miss dancing. And so sometimes, even on social media, if anybody's following me on social media, there are a few clips of me just clearing out the stuff in my living room and just dancing because I do miss that opportunity, right? To dance. And I'm sure the boys miss that opportunity to be in the studio actually dancing. But I think that dance comes in many different forms. And I think that many of our boys have begun to, find themselves as little choreographers as they're beginning to, come up with different styles of dance on their own being at home. And so I'm looking forward to coming back into the space and seeing the creativity of our boys.
And I'm glad you brought that up because for people who are not into the arts, they don't understand that there is a connectedness that comes with being in the same space.
That's right.
Most of my early work was in choral music. And so there is something to be said for being in the space with your peers.
Yeah.
And when you don't have that connection, that impacts a lot of other areas in ways that, those of us who understand can figure out.
That's right.
And so I'm glad that you did discuss how you all are trying to continue to work. Because, I know so many organizations that have either closed or are not doing anything because they can't figure out how to make it work, And I just get concerned when I see those things happening to our people, because I also understand that there is a sense of hope and attainability that comes when our young people have those experiences.
Absolutely.
So I'm glad that you all are working to figure out how to keep them engaged.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think from an art perspective, many companies, dance companies, and other artists are finding these creative ways to still engage people around the area of the arts. And so I've just been inspired by that, like the professional dancers in dance companies and how they are utilizing technology and other types of, things to incorporate, to engage during this time when we cannot go to a live performance, And so that has helped to inspire me and inspire how it is that we're going to move forward.
I was impressed with the Augusta Symphony. They developed this at-home membership package. So you pay, but when I tell you I enjoy sitting in my house and I didn't have to get dressed and all, watching the performance. And so then the space on the stage and all, the orchestra could spread out. There might be 50 or 60 people actually in that audience. But I was like, I might keep this membership because I could do this regularly. I'm not in Augusta. I don't live there anymore, but it's an opportunity, I think, that we have in the arts to expose a wider audience to what we do.
Absolutely.
Because you're in DC Metro, but I'm in Georgia, and if there's an opportunity to see what you all do virtually, I do have that. So I think that we have begun really in the arts to view things in a different light, where it's not all just in our space, in our little bubble.
That's right.
And so I think that there are, as you said, some positives that are coming out of all of this chaos.
Yeah. And people are beginning to be exposed to different art forms that they were never engaged with, and perhaps never would be engaged with before the pandemic. And so what a blessing and what an awesome thing that is, that, like you said, you can live in one part of the country and not even know that this thing is happening in another part of the country. But now, because we're in this virtual context, you have an opportunity to be exposed to that. And I think that's so important, even for our children, right? Particularly for boys. And think about dance. Right? For our boys to see that there are other boys in different parts of the country and world, who love dance as much as they do. And for them to be able to see that and connect has really been instrumental and will be instrumental in the arts moving forward. And so even like the symphony that you talked about, I'm certain that moving forward from this space, art organizations will begin to think more creatively on how it is that we can present the arts, in different ways. For people who cannot come in person, or for people who don't want to come in person, as you shared, that you like to sit in your home, right? And so there are more than two people that have that same experience. And so I'm excited to see what, those art organizations will do beyond the pandemic.
And it also allows for us to diversify audiences.
That's right.
I work in classical arts. We are heavily not minority.
Right.
But with these types of opportunities, somebody might just pop in and be like, oh, wow, this is interesting. And so, like you said, sometimes exposure redirects how we look at things. Like, I was completely against certain types of music. And, I've experienced some of it during this pandemic. I'm like, well, I guess it's not that bad. I'm a gospel person.
Yeah.
All that contemporary Christian stuff was not my lane.
Right.
But because of where we are, I have been in some situations or something to pop on, and I'll actually listen to it. And I'm like, oh, well, this is so that I'm also developing my own palette, so I know who and what to listen to. But I think that you did bring up something very valid, in that this exposure to audiences, to younger people, to people around the world is just, I think it's going to be really good for the arts if our administrators will get on board and shift things forward.
Yeah.
I'm discouraged when I hear all these people talking about, I can't wait for us to get back to normal. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, because what is normal? Yeah, what is normal? And I do think that school leaders are beginning to. This pandemic has forced them to begin to think outside of the box on ways to engage children and families. And I do think that many of school leaders, at least the ones that I'm engaged with, are thinking about how to engage. And so the arts now becomes, the focal point, right? Even at our school, we always had boys ballet. But now we have boys ballet, we have CrossFit, we have, drumming, we have, music, we have all of these other kinds of ways for our boys and families to be engaged in the arts. And so there are some positive and powerful things that are coming out of this space that we're currently in.
And the arts directly, for those of you who are always like, we need to close the arts on, directly impacts every other area of academics, every other type of learning, all of our cognitive skills. People always used to, when I told them I was in music, they would look at me and, give that look. I was like, but my grades are higher than most people's. Our intellectual comprehension and the way we analyze is completely different because that's how we function.
Yeah.
And so I think that, I'm with you in that. Let's expose them to everything and then let them figure it out.
Absolutely.
So I spent many years as a classical singer. I was good at it, but did you see the movie Center Stage?
I did.
So at the end when her and her mother had that talk, that was me. I was really good at it, but I did not enjoy it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother really loved it, but she was not as talented as I was. And I finally had a conversation with her. I understand we've invested all this money in this. The skills are transferable, but the music career is over.
Right. I won't do this no more.
Now, I swear my whole life I would never be in education. My mother was a 37-year educator in Detroit Public Schools, and I swore to her the one thing I would never do is education. Now here we are.
Yeah.
Everything I do is education.
Yeah.
So I think that's her way of getting back at me for all the money her and my father invested in my music preparation.
Yeah.
So you have a book out recently that I got to get my copy. Normally I would have it by now, but in a rough few weeks. But tell us about this book. I think it's awesome. I've seen people talking about it all over the internet. And so tell us about this book.
Yeah, so I Am My History is a children's book that celebrates the creativity and brilliance of Black and brown children while also honoring our ancestors who paved the way and whose spirits live inside of us. I wanted to write something that would affirm and teach at the same time. So affirm our young people and who they are to become, while also teaching them about their rich history and cultural legacy. I believe that when children learn their rich history, that they have the tools necessary to write their own narratives and journey through life with cultural pride. And so when we think in terms of the title, I Am My History, I wanted them to also see the connection between the set of skills and the creativity and the power and the strength and the courage and the resilience that our ancestors had, and how those same skills have been transferred to them, and they too walk with those skills. Because sometimes children learning their history, they're disconnected from their history because their history is not taught. And if it is taught, it's not taught. The truth of their history is not taught, or the history is not taught in its entirety, or the history is not taught in a powerful and positive way. And so what ends up happening is that our children begin to see our history from the lenses of enslavement and not the lenses of empowerment. And so I Am My History is an opportunity for children to begin to see their history, their legacy, from those areas of creativity and brilliance and strength and courage. And I wanted to make sure that that children had something that they can, go to, an anthem of affirmation, if you will, that they can go to whenever they are feeling down, whenever they are feeling that they're not worthy or that they're not enough. I wanted I Am My History to be something that said to them in a loud way, in an emphatic way, you are your history, and you will be able to continue the rich legacy that has been laid for you.
I'm glad you said that. I had Dr. Erin Gilliam from Kentucky State University on my panel last week, and she was saying something similar. We had a whole discussion about how our history didn't start with enslavement, and we were not brought here as slaves.
That's
we
right.
were enslaved and we were brought here,
Mm-hmm.
but we did not come here as slaves. And we were just spending some time discussing the fact that, you know, our history didn't start here. Like there was stuff that happened before that.
That's right.
And I am on this whole kick right now of us developing our own narrative and not allowing other people to develop it. Even as I look at HBCUs, so much of the narrative is not written by us.
That's right.
And I'm glad that you approached this writing that you did, because many of us start with the high school and developing an understanding of who we are. But that's about 15 years late.
Right.
And it takes people like you who understand the cognitive abilities of young people and all of that to develop documents that appeal to them and teach.
And you know, yes, and also when we think in terms of Black history, right, or we think in terms of teaching history, it's more than offering knowledge. It's more than giving facts. It's an opportunity for our children's souls to be mended and their spirits awakened.
Right.
When we think about the seat of the soul, or what is the soul, at the seat of our soul, or the center of our soul, is our heritage, our culture, our history, our legacy. When we think about our spirit are our dreams, our aspirations, our goals, the things that wake us up in the morning. And so we have to recognize that our children are suffering from a broken soul and a dead spirit. And it's all because of that missing piece, which is knowing, embracing, and celebrating their rich history and cultural legacy. And so when we are teaching Black history, we have to look at it as not just an opportunity to offer knowledge, but this is an opportunity for me to help our children to mend their soul, to be reconnected with their history in a way where it will awaken their spirit and they'll be able to soar. And I think oftentimes what happens is that when we think in terms of Black history, right? And you know this all too well, you are a direct beneficiary of a vision that was created so that Black people could celebrate and embrace the rich history, but it was not intended to stop or begin just in February. And so I wrote this book in August before Black History Month, because I wanted teachers and parents to understand that when we are teaching our children their history, we're mending their souls, awakening their spirits, and therefore giving them the tools to write their own narrative. You can't write your own narrative if you don't know what the narrative was, right? We have been given a falsified narrative or a fragmented narrative, right? And so when we understand the fullness of the narrative, that's when we have the courage and the confidence to write our own. See, if we in a real sense teach our children about the ancient civilizations that our people created, the mathematical systems and the science systems that our people created, when someone tries to share only that portion of history that we know as enslavement, because our children know it, they'll be able to put it in its place and recognize this is not all of my history, right? That gives you a sense of confidence. So you begin to write your own history. And what's happening is that we don't oftentimes have those books to share with our children that will give them that opportunity to delve into the trueness or the fullness of their history. So that's why I wrote I Am My History, because I wanted them to feel, you know, like I wanted kids to be done reading this book and say, I'm the dopest kid ever. And my ancestors are dope too. And nobody can touch me because we're just some dope people. And I don't think many of our kids have that, right? They don't have that portion, a part of their life. And I just wanted to make sure that they had that. When you look at other cultures oftentimes have a healthy dose of cultural pride. a healthy dose of knowledge about their history, and that changes or shapes their identity. And so I wanted to do the same thing for children of color.
And I have 2 points. Yeah, I think what you just said is amazing. Yes, I am a Christian to my core, but I do study religions.
Yeah.
And it is amazing to me the way that Muslims and the way that Jewish people just incorporate who they are from the beginning to now in their daily lives. So it's not like, I'm a Christian on Sunday and Wednesday. It is really incorporated into everything they do. And it was very obvious when the synagogue, the major synagogue, the Jewish synagogue, burnt down. The news was all up in arms, but they were like, well, we'll just have to rebuild it.
Because the history is within us. Right? When we look at the Muslim culture, when we look at they, in a real sense, like you said, it's a part of their everyday existence. With Black history, we oftentimes wait until now, right, to share. And then when the week after next comes, you won't hear as much about Black history and culture. But think about the power that is in teaching children their history and their culture throughout the entire year as just a part of being, right? The reason why our children can't really connect to history is because they only see it in one month, right? Or one piece of time. They don't see it on a continuum. And so this book, and there are other books that talk about, Black people and the experiences that Black people are having that children can see. This is an opportunity for them to see their history on a continuum, because then it'll become a part of their being. And so, like you said, the church burned down. Another analogy, not maybe the church burned down, but your history has been tore down, right? But because it lives within you, you have an opportunity to stand up against it.
And that's why I developed my BH12 initiative, which focuses on Black history all 12 months, because, my family is aware that when Carnegie Woodson started, what we do now is not his intent. Right. We're supposed to study all year and then celebrate during that 1 week in February, which is now a month. But, in 1976, when the president authorized the study of Black history, the whole concept really started shifting to, oh, well, we give you all this month to, be who you are. And then please on March 1st, put it away until next year.
Right.
And I think that goes even to us writing our own narrative. We as a people have allowed that to happen.
That's right.
If we want change, and we have to shift it, and part of what my initiative is doing is working on getting school systems to shift how history is studied.
That's
working with policymakers to shift policy.
That's right.
Because that's really how we're going to make change. I didn't have any history study in my entire educational exchange until I got to an HBCU.
Yeah.
And I went to a Black high school, but before that I went to Caucasian schools. I didn't even hear Black History Month mentioned there. And I tend to not say Black History Month. I am starting to say on everything I do that, we're celebrating Black history. And I'm taking that month off, because I think semantics are important.
That's right.
But it concerns me that we have majority Black school systems that are not having any kind of incorporation of our history into the regular curriculum. And I'm not talking about we have a program in February and, we learn about the same six figures who are instrumental, but there are other people. Most people don't even know who Carnegie Woodson is.
That's right. Don't know who he is, and is the visionary of the month that they're celebrating. But not only that, but most of our children don't really even know about these ancient civilizations that were led by people that look exactly like them. One of the things at my school that I love is that people oftentimes always say to us, or have even said even in this month, why are you guys doing so much more? You guys should be doing something every single day during Black History Month, because, you're a school for Black and brown boys. And what we say to them? We teach our boys about their history and cultural legacy every single day. And so what we did during this month was highlight Black stories. So we brought in Black children's authors. We allowed boys to see, movies by Black people, because we really wanted to celebrate all that it means to be an author, and children seeing themselves reflected. We did not we did not have to use this month to give every piece of Black history that we can give, because this is something that we do on a regular basis. And like you said, it's concerning to me that schools do this whole performative piece of education, right? These performative academics around Black history during this month as a way to ignore it in the other months. Mm-hmm. Right. And so it's also a little strategic, too. If we give all this hoopla during this month, then these children will think that their history is great. But then when March comes, or when September comes, or October comes, our children don't hear anything about their culture and their history. That does something to our children. It does something to their identity. And so I just wrote this book, man, and will continue to write books that give children an opportunity to see their history and their culture, to imagine and to dream, and to celebrate their uniqueness and their authenticity.
So as we move into the final segment, I'm going to move to a personal note.
Okay.
For you, why is history important? Why is the work that you're doing important for you? We've heard about the impact it's having on everyone else. But what is the impact the work is having on you?
Yeah, so I think when I think of why history or Black history is important to me, I think it's important for me because in those moments when I'm frustrated or I feel like my strength has been sapped, I have an opportunity to look at that ancestral cloud by which I'm surrounded. And I have an opportunity to pull from those ancestors. And the strength of those ancestors continues to guide and to lead me. And when I talk about the ancestors, I'm not just talking about our historical ancestors. I'm talking about the ancestor like my grandmother, right? Whose spirit is helping to lead and guide me, whose spirit I lean on when I am writing books or having conversations or, standing in front of people. So it's important to learn our history so that we recognize that we have access, an abundance of access to people and to a set of skills and tools that we may not oftentimes have, but our ancestors had and have, and as a result of that, we now have them as well. So it's that opportunity for me. And then I just love to learn and to listen to the stories of our ancestors, how they got over, right? Or not even how they got over, but how they made certain things. I'm so interested in learning about these civilizations. Much of the work that these ancient kings and queens did, the foundations they laid, we are benefiting from many of those things even today. So knowing that gives me so much joy and so much pride. So that's why it's important for me to learn my history. And it's impacted me greatly. I think the impact that I receive is really from seeing the joy and excitement that children have when learning their history. And it encourages me to continue doing the work. And it encourages me to continue finding ways to teach, finding ways to educate, empower, and inspire.
So in our final moments, what are words of wisdom or inspiration that you have to people watching, to the young people who will see this later, and to our educators?
To young people, I want you to know that you are your ancestors' wildest dreams, that you are gifted, you are talented, you are loved, you have value, and that your voice matters. So I want you to continue doing the thing that you love to do, knowing that you have ancestors and people around you who will lead and guide you. To the educators, it is our role and our responsibility to do more than just be concerned about the academic trajectory of our children. But we must be in the business of mending souls, awakening the spirits of our children, giving them an opportunity to write their own narratives and soar to the places that they've been called to soar.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yes.
It is really always great when I get to have conversations with people, especially, people who are new to my network. I'm hoping this will not be your last time on my show.
Yep, I'll be back.
Great. So don't go anywhere. I'll be right back with you.
All righty.
So I hope everyone really got something out of this discussion. I am excited. Make sure I will put up on my pages how you can purchase the book, because we do want to make sure that we are sharing this information with all of our young people, that we don't just start those conversations when they become 14, 15, or 16. Make sure that you're also aware that this is the last Dean Talk for the month of February. I will be on some other individual shows, but this is my last Dean Talk. My last show of any kind will be next Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. and we're going to have my Coffee Chronicle with R. Wayne Woodson. And my topic next week is going to be self-sabotage. So if you want to hear, if you want to share, if you want to be with me, that's early now. That's 8 a.m. next Wednesday, and we're going to be talking about self-sabotage. And make sure that you share this and any of my programming with your networks. Final thing, I am going to be shifting all the recordings to my YouTube channel. So if you don't catch the shows live, you'll need to connect on my YouTube, which is Dr. Woodson 2020, where you will be able to find all of my recordings. Thank you all for watching and contributing, sharing, and supporting my work. And yes, we are celebrating Black History at this time, but that does not stop on February 28th. Make sure that you incorporate that knowledge and learning and celebration throughout your year and throughout your networks. Once again, have a great evening, and thank you so much for joining us today.